Good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to welcome you today to this presentation. My name is Peter Lamott. I'm Senior Vice President here at Chernoff Newman in our Charleston office. I am joined by Fenton Overdyke, our Director of Research, who's based in our Columbia office. Our goal today is that you're going to come out of this better informed for making business decisions across the next week and months, thanks to the insights that you're going to gain here today. I want to first say and point out that our intention is to take you through this data to simply give you a high-level understanding of the research and what we found in the Chernoff Newman Insights poll, but it is very high level. So we really welcome the opportunity for all of you, our clients, to sit down and walk you through this data with much greater detail, specifically as it relates to your industry and your business, because as you can imagine, you're going to see a lot of data, but there's so much more behind it. Crosstabs of geography, how people are thinking in different locations, socioeconomic breakdown, as well as even political preference. So for today, if you have any questions during the call, this is how we're going to run it. Feel free to add them into the chat feature. I'm sure by now we've all been home for over a month, most of us. You're probably well aware on how to use Zoom, but add your questions into the chat feature, and we will pull up at the end of the slides to go through any questions you may have. I know it's going to be a fairly worn out statement for all of you, but we really are living in unprecedented times. The last time the country was dealing with a global pandemic of this nature, the world was considerably different. Your average home didn't even have telephones when we last dealt with anything remotely like this. The speed of communications, by definition, was slow. Today, the speed of communications is immediate. Back then, economies were not immediately impacted as they are today, nor was there any ability to manipulate opinions through channels such as social media or 24-hour news. So this means that the opinions of your stakeholders are constantly changing, almost daily. Your partners, your employees, your customers, they're all going to come out of this irrevocably changed. And it makes sense, right? Everything has changed. The entire world has changed in just a few short months. Whether that's how we're keeping our workforce productive and engaged while they're working remotely, how our children are being educated, or simply something like consuming meals, or how we're adjusting our travel. Our approach to life has changed fundamentally. The impact that the coronavirus has had on the Carolinas and the economies is unlike anything we've ever seen. The solutions are not clear either. The paths forward each have their own potential for failure. And that forces us as business leaders to rely upon data and getting that data through any means possible, including constant communications with your stakeholders across all channels. And that's where this poll comes in. The poll is here to provide a snapshot into the impact that the coronavirus has had on the lives of all consumers, to help you and your business better understand how consumers not only have changed their behaviors, but also how some of these behaviors might continue both in the short term or even possibly permanently. The implications of these changes and what they will have on North and South Carolina's economy are massive. And the impact they will have on your industry and your business are equally as important. Our study serves as a benchmark for measuring changes as the situation and environment continue to change. We've already seen changes in public sentiment as it relates to statewide policies. And so for that reason, we're going to update this study regularly. We're going to go back and revisit topics that are of particular interest to you, our clients, as well as add ones that we think are important for you to be aware of. So let's talk about what we know now at a very high level. Consumers are equally concerned as they are confident. They're concerned about the unknown, but they're confident that things will move forward. Yet, they know moving forward that things will never be the same. So they're optimistic, but that isn't a large part because they're just embracing the new normal. They understand that things are going to take time, regardless of timelines or deadlines set by governments, whether those are national, statewide, or local. They're equally committed to wanting to get their life back. as they are equally committed to adopting the preventative measures and guidelines needed in the situation. That means that while they want to get back to eating out, they're also committed to social distancing as simply a new way of life. And this is going to have an impact on a lot of businesses and a lot of sectors across the Carolinas. For example, Fenton's going to talk about travel in greater detail, but we're going to discuss the considerations of consumer to adjust their travel plans. Being in North and South Carolina, logic would assume that they may look closer to home for vacation opportunities, possibly keeping travel just within the state. This would mean for organizations such as visitors bureaus and hospitality that they may need to place a higher priority on in-state marketing and advertising, along with changing their messaging to appeal to that new and broader audience. Most consumers feel that we are in this for the long haul. That means for you, the business leaders of this region, you need to take a hard look on how you're going to communicate in this new normal. You need to best understand how your stakeholders have been changed in what is essentially a blink of an eye, because they have changed and they've changed permanently. And it's now our job to communicate with them. And just as before, we need to communicate with them in the ways that they want to be communicated with. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fenton to take us through the methodology and the layout of this study.
So we are intense observers of consumer behavior. And as such, as the coronavirus outbreak began, we were looking at a lot of national polls, national studies that were providing insight into consumer behavior. But what we weren't seeing is anything specific to the Carolinas. And so we saw this as an opportunity to go out, do some primary research, and better understand what's going on here in the Carolinas. So what you're going to see today is side-by-side data looking at North and South Carolina consumers. Our total sample size is 1,000, that's 500 for each state. And this data just came in. Literally, we went to the field last week and finished data collection on Saturday. In terms of a framework, in terms of an outline, here's some of the topics we're going to take you through today. We're going to give you a peek into how worried are people? How are people doing out there? What impacts has it already had on employment? How have consumers changed their behavior? And how do they see that behavior changing long-term? How are they getting their news? How are they staying informed? How are they following the coronavirus? Clearly, this is probably, even for some of you already, having significant and serious impacts on travel, education, and even how we're buying and consuming food.
So as we take a look at the impact on everyday life and behavior, we need to consider how this translates into the new habits of our employees, our customers, and our communities. When we formulate our style of communications, marketing, advertising, we need to constantly be considerate of their stress levels and their expectations. We as business leaders cannot assume that everything is fine in their eyes, nor can we assume that they're in panic. This is a perfect example why we need to pay more attention to the data we now have in hand.
So the first question on the poll literally is, as it relates to the coronavirus, how would you describe the level of stress in your household? And we had people rank it from 1 being, listen, I'm close to meltdown, to 5, hey, pretty zen. You find a lot of people right there in the middle. But what I want to point out, when you look at the percentage of people who said they're either at a meltdown or very close to it in those first 2 bars, that's about 20%. That's nearly 1 in 5 residents in the Carolinas saying, listen, I'm not doing well. By market, you see that things are pretty even. We do see that Charleston is a little bit more anxious and panicky than our other major markets. And it's good that people aren't in full-fledged panic mode. That's not something you want, but they are concerned. Consumers are very concerned, as you see, about coming into contact with the coronavirus, or that they'll contract the coronavirus and become ill. People also understand that this isn't going away overnight. While you see about a quarter of people are optimistic that the coronavirus, things will return to normal by summer, most think it's at least the fall, and many thinking we're in this for quite some time. So the coronavirus pandemic is clearly a healthcare crisis. it's also a financial crisis. We ask people, to what extent are you concerned about your health and the health of your family? And to what extent are you worried about your finances? And here's where things become a conflict for consumers. They're worried about their jobs, they're worried about money, they're worried about their finances, and they're worried about their health. So while they simultaneously would like to see things get back to normal, they know it's going to take some time, but there are real financial implications to all this.
So as business leaders, there may be no data point that we are more acutely aware of than how this has impacted our workforce, whether it has been layoffs, furloughs, or simply cutting back on cost in order to keep all our employees. Without fail, we have all had to adapt to the changes impacting our stakeholders for more than a month now. And as things begin to open up, we're looking to consumers in this particular section of the study to gauge how they think about their employment, its stability, and how the style of work will change or remain the same.
And already we're seeing drastic changes in employment status. If you look at the bottom of this slide, the percentage of households who have experienced one or more of the above conditions, a majority in both North and South Carolina have been impacted as it relates to their employment status. Whether it be from something working from home, as I've been doing for the past 6 weeks, to experiencing a cut in pay. Some of the larger numbers can overshadow some of the smaller numbers. And when you look at the percentage of people who have lost a job, 10 and 12% in our respective states, while that can seem a small number to a state that has 4.5 million people, that's 450,000 people who have lost a job. So even a seemingly small number like that can have a both huge and devastating impact on our economy. The good news in all this is that people are confident that they will return to work. The question here is, how confident are you that your job will be there when the pandemic ends? And you see, both in South Carolina, consumers are confident their jobs will be there. It's kind of remarkable how similar the data is from state to state. Here's an example, though, where you see consumers in South Carolina looking at the top box, the percent who say they're very confident, statistically significantly different and higher than what you find in North Carolina. By market, you see in South Carolina, there's a little bit more confidence in Columbia, particularly at that top box level. Whereas in North Carolina, Charlotte dips down, not quite as confident as the other, Greensboro and Raleigh.
So let's talk about changes in behavior. Nothing new here. We've all had to adapt our behavior in some way in the past few weeks. Some of that makes sense, like washing our hands more. Some of it was unexpected, like having to wear a mask in public regardless of how we feel. Many of these behavioral changes have had silver linings, such as spending more time with our families. However, what was unclear is how much of this behavior did consumers intend to continue. Dealing with issues such as eating out, watching movies from home rather than in a theater, or simply wearing a mask, consumers are having to evaluate which of these behaviors they will carry forward and which of these they will leave behind with the coronavirus. It's our job as business leaders to adapt to their behavior around them.
So we asked people what they missed most during this quarantine. What about their old lives are they missing the most? And clearly people want to get back to, they want to go out to eat again. But as we're going to see in a minute, that has to be balanced with their need and want to socially distance and avoid becoming sick. People miss their friends. They miss getting together. They very much miss their old lives. So here's a question. We had people rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how well they are rigidly practicing social distancing. Again, a self-evaluation. For those of you who go out in public, you might think that people aren't quite doing this well. But you have very few people say they're not doing it all. The next bar is the percentage of people saying they would rate themselves a 1, 2, or 3. The percentage of people doing okay, that's a 4, 5, or 6. Percentage of people doing a good job, that's the percentage of people who rate themselves a 7 or 8. And about half thinking they are nearly perfectly practicing social distancing. A good thing in theory, if not in practice. So what else are you doing? 96% say they're practicing social distancing, they're washing their hands more. A number we'll look at in just a minute, the high percentage of people who have canceled or postponed travel. They're spending more time with their family. There are parts of this that we'll see in just a minute that people are actually enjoying. There is good that's coming out of the bad. So this looks at, okay, here's what you're doing now, 96%, 95% practicing social distancing. After this is all over, after the pandemic ends, what do you think you're going to be doing? A lot of people saying they're going to continue social distancing. A lot of people saying, I'm going to be paying more attention, I'm going to be washing my hands more. People intend to spend more time with family. They tend to pray more after the pandemic. So again, some changes we've been forced to make, and some of these changes are likely to continue. Here are a couple more examples. We asked people, after the pandemic ends, how might some of your behaviors change? And people say that they might cook at home more and go out to eat less. They might stream movies more instead of going to the movie theater, order food to go instead of dining in, work more from home. We've all figured out that we can actually do that, and in many cases quite successfully. And a third saying after the pandemic ends, they very well might, in fact, continue wearing a mask in public places.
So how we stay informed. I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, the way in which we are informed or sometimes misinformed can be based on political perspective. There are more channels to consume content and opinion than ever before, from local TV all the way up to major news networks to social media. Each plays an important part in how people are looking at the future, but it also plays an important part on who we trust. So as we look to return our economy to normal, how people react may be more influenced by which outlets they choose to source their information from, and less by what we communicate to them as a business.
Peter referred to the last time this happened and how simple things were, how slowly things move. And now we have so many platforms, so many sources of information. There's a lot on this slide, and I'll give you a moment to find the sources of, that you use. But even with all the sources out there, we're still seeing that local TV news and the major networks are the most likely to be relied on during this coronavirus pandemic. We also ask consumers, okay, as you're receiving news, how do you perceive this news? You see about half, nearly half saying, I think the news I'm receiving about the coronavirus is fairly accurate. After that, people are more likely to say it's not being taken seriously enough than they are exaggerated. But just you see a difference of opinion, and as we'll see in this next slide, opinions varying a little bit based on the news source that they are getting their information from. Most people, again, feeling that regardless of the news source, it's either accurate or not serious enough, with small percentages saying, no, I think the news is kind of exaggerated. So we find high confidence in both federal and state health organizations, with confidence being higher for highest for Center for Disease Control and Prevention, but also for the national. CDC also benefits from its brand name reputation. It's more of a household entity. People more familiar with it as an entity, whereas, you know, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease certainly has been getting a lot of attention, but it's just not as well known, but still trusted, regardless of your state's health department being a trusted source. And of course, during our study, there were talk of defunding the World Health Organization, and we did in fact see confidence in that organization drop 5 percentage points pre and post conversation about that.
So let's talk about travel. There are few states on the Eastern Seaboard that are as dedicated to and impacted by the travel and tourism industry as the Carolinas. Whether that's traveling to the beaches or to sporting events, there are expectations of summer travel that are now being reevaluated. So it's important for us to take a look at how the pandemic is impacting the behavior of consumers related to their travel plans and how quickly they believe things will return to normal.
So what we found is already last week, 65 and 67% respectively, South Carolina and North Carolina consumers have already canceled or postponed trips. Clearly, this has huge implications on the travel and tourism industry, particularly as we look into the very important months of summer travel. We asked, what is your confidence in your ability to take a summer vacation? And you see people are not confident in their ability to take a summer vacation. Lots up in the air, big questions for those in the travel and tourism industry.
Education and the impact from the coronavirus. Anyone on this call who has children at home who are typically in school right now, whether that's preschool or college or somewhere in between, understands how disruptive the coronavirus has been. And while the educational system has attempted to adapt very quickly, there remains a lot of questions around whether that adaptation has been seen as a success or a failure in the eyes of consumers.
So as we saw a couple of slides back, people are looking forward to their children returning to school. That being said, in the new normal, people are happy with the way things are going. They think that their children's schools are doing a good job at communicating. They think that the online instruction is good, right amount of homework, and most importantly, feeling that their child is going to be prepared for next year. This is another case where on some data, you see North and South Carolina being about even when it comes to overall communication. But on the whole, it seems like satisfaction among South Carolinians is just a little bit higher than among North Carolinians.
So food consumption in the coronavirus and eating out. When it comes to eating out or simply just putting food on the table, there may be no area that generates as much concern or opinion. As life returns to normal, or at least this new normal, we set out to understand how people plan to adapt their eating behaviors, whether it be to continue takeout rather than dining in, or whether they plan on eating at home as they did before the pandemic. These perceptions could have a lasting impact on our hospitality and food and beverage industries, as well as our farming backbone here in the Carolinas.
And look, the way we get groceries now has changed so much over the past couple of weeks, and people are concerned about it. What caught my attention is they're concerned now, while we're still kind of on the uptick, perhaps flattening in this pandemic, but they're concerned long-term. In the coming weeks, there's even greater concern than there is right now. And those of us who shop, buy, or order groceries understand there have been significant delays. There have been things that you can't get. The world has really changed in this area. It has not affected all equally, though. When we looked at the demographic breakdowns, while there is concern overall, more concern among females. Those of you who have children in the household know how quickly food can go, and you see people with children in the household much more concerned than those who don't have children. And it has a socioeconomic impact as well, with lower household income showing greater concern about the availability of food in the coming weeks. We also wanted to understand, people are shopping, in some cases they're hoarding a little bit, at least with certain household items. But most people say they have, about 2 weeks worth of food, enough on hand to get by, but still some concerns about availability moving forward. All this, of course, when we start to look at long-term implications, how people have responded to the pandemic and looking at how they might perhaps change behaviors long-term, just like we saw for travel and tourism, some pretty potentially significant impacts on restaurant industry and food in general, as people might cook at home more and go out to eat less, or order food to go instead of dining in. We also wanted to understand, just like in that first question, we wanted to understand how stressed out people were, how they're doing. Are they okay? We also asked an open-ended question that asked what, if any, good has come out of the situation that we find ourselves in. And while we had a lot of respondents who just said nothing good has come out of this, or I really don't know, haven't really been thinking about it that way, there were a tremendous number of responses around, I'm enjoying spending more time with family. Things have slowed down, they are different. And a lot of comments relating to things are simpler. Things have slowed down. I'm reprioritizing what's important. I'm thinking more about what I need than what I want. And it's really striking just in my life as I, sit down at my desk and read news. Most of it is not good. But when I take the dog for a walk or walk with the family, kids are out on their bikes, families walking the dog, getting exercise, jogging, riding bikes. And so there has been an element to this that has, times have just slowed down and people are enjoying parts of this.
So thank you again for the time today. We realize it's crazy and everyone is trying to balance and fit their entire workday, sometimes into balancing daycare and childcare. And we wanted to just make sure we gave you the highlights of the Chernoff Newman Insights poll. If you didn't notice it at the bottom of the slides, we've put it again at the bottom of this one. We have dedicated a website with all of these results. You are the first ones to see it. But insights.chernoffnewman.com is now live. Feel free to go there, go through this data at your own pace. Likewise, we look to update this study as time and perceptions start to change. And as another reminder, there is a tremendous amount of data behind these slides. So we welcome the opportunity to walk you through the data in any detail you want, and particularly as it relates to your industry. There are sections, cross sections here that are going to matter more to some people than others. Knowing that there is a tremendous of cross-tab data behind this, it's important for you to know there's more of this story for us to tell you. So again, thank you for your time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. I will make sure, and Fenton, myself, and the team, we'll make sure that we get this data to you. It is on the website, and that members of your account team and your contacts at Chernoff Newman will be reaching out to you. I'll pause for a second to see if there are any questions, but know that you can reach out to us at any point. We are here for you, no matter when, no matter how, and we will help you go through this data as it best relates to your industry and business. So, Fenton, we have one question just came in. Can you share more about the demographics of the 1,000 people surveyed?
Yes, absolutely. So when we went into the field, we always install quotas so that we make sure our sample is reflective and projectable to the greater population. So we had controls in there to ensure that we're representative with respect to ethnicity, age, geographic placement, and things like that. And to further that, so today what we showed you is really the tip of the iceberg. This data just came in. We were out of the field on Saturday, reporting to you today. And in the coming weeks, we will be, coming days and weeks, we'll be doing reports with greater detail, looking into the differences by age. You just take that question on media consumption and how different that's going to be when you start to look at demographic breakdowns. So yeah, lots more to come on that.
Thank you, Noel. Another question for you, Fenton. What were the most surprising findings for you, having looked at things over time?
So the surprising thing, and the thing that remains to be seen, so the surprising thing right now is how people are saying that some of the behaviors and modifications that they've made in their lifestyle are going to continue once the pandemic ends. And what is interesting to me is as we do further testing, to see, okay, this is what people are saying they're going to do right now. They might be a little hesitant to go dine in a restaurant once the pandemic ends, but are they really going to do that? And so those are some of the big questions for me and some of the interesting topics. I mean, just yesterday, I saw a national study, I think it ran in the Post and Courier, they reported on it, where 8 in 10 Americans, this was a national poll, said that they're not going to be comfortable going to restaurants when they open. In fact, it said that perhaps restaurants, people won't be comfortable congregating at the bar when they wait for a table. They might prefer a disposable menu. I think 65% said they would be comfortable even wearing a mask or shield as long as they weren't actively eating or drinking. So those become the very interesting things to me. How will the changes we've had to make, how will we continue to make them long term?
Thank you, JC. Any other questions before we wrap this up? Okay, well, with that, I want to conclude the call today, and thank you everyone for your time. It is greatly appreciated. And if there's anything we can do for you, please reach out to your team. We are Fenton or I related to this topic, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.